In the hush of midnight, where the world's clamor dissolves into the soft rustle of forgotten pages and your eyelids flutter like moths against an unseen flame, imagine a library so vast it held the dreams of empires, its shelves whispering secrets not of conquest but of quiet surrender. What if the ancient scribes of Alexandria, those gentle guardians of ink and papyrus, had mastered the art of turning wakeful hours into woven reveries, their reed pens etching lullabies into the very air? Tonight, as your thoughts circle like unmoored scrolls in a desert wind, let this be your ultra hook, the soothing facts of those scribes and the quiet library that cradled civilizations to rest, a sanctuary where even gods doze beneath starlit vaults. Close your eyes, weary seeker of slumber, and step through the pharos-shadowed gate, where the sea's eternal sigh meets the scroll's eternal hush, and discover how these ink-stained sages can finally unspool the knots of your endless night. Leora Hale had not tasted sleep's mercy in 4 seasons, not since the fever dream that claimed her father's library in a seaside cottage on the Cornish coast, leaving her 31 and adrift in London's fog-choked archives. A paleographer by trade, she spent her days deciphering the brittle spines of medieval codices in the British Library's undercroft, her nights a vigil of velvet darkness pierced by the relentless glow of her bedside lamp. Her flat in Clerkenwell was a reliquary of restlessness, ink pots dried to husks on her desk, half-read tomes splayed like wounded birds, and a hammock strung across the window that swayed mockingly with every sigh. Specialists offered elixirs that soured her tongue and journals that mocked her midnight confessions, but nothing quelled the tide, the relentless replay of waves crashing against her father's final cough, the way his hand had clutched a water-damaged volume of Herodotus as if it could anchor him to the world. Colleagues whispered of her scribe's curse, a poetic affliction for one who chased ghosts in faded script, but Leora knew it for what it was, a soul adrift, unmoored from the harbor of repose. Yet on that mist-shrouded October evening in 2025, as Big Ben's chime bled into the Thames murmur, Leora's fingers, stained black from cataloguing a cache of Ptolemaic fragments, brushed against an anomaly in the archive's locked vitrine, a shard of Alexandrian papyrus, its edges frayed like the hem of a beggar's robe, inscribed with a single line in honeyed demotic, "In the library's quiet, even the stars scribe their own dreams." Her breath caught, not in alarm, but in the first fragile bloom of wonder. What if insomnia was not a curse, but a call to the ancients? What if the scribes of Alexandria, those velvet-voiced chroniclers of cosmos and calm, had long ago inscribed the antidote in their midnight margins? She slipped the shard into her satchel, the archive's hush her accomplice, and hurried home through streets slick with autumn's reluctant tears. By lamplight, she unrolled it fully, or what remained, a tattered remnant no larger than her palm, salvaged perhaps from the flames of Caesar's siege or the slow erosion of time's indifferent tide. The script danced under her magnifier, not mere words, but a fragment of the Nocturnal Codex, a lost treatise on the scribe's art of repose, penned by one Callias of Kos, a gentle soul who served under Ptolemy II and believed the library was no repository of knowledge, but a cradle for the weary mind. Leora traced the faded ink, her pulse sinking unwittingly with the imagined scratch of a reed calamos on dampened papyrus, and felt a subtle unwinding in her chest, as if the shard had exhaled a breath held for 2 millennia. Callias wrote of the scribes not as laborers, but as weavers of night's tapestry, men and women, for Alexandria welcomed the daughters of Sappho into its halls, who rose before dawn not with dread, but with the reverence of midwives attending a cosmic birth. They began in the Serapeum's antechambers, vast halls floored with cool Parian marble veined like sleeping rivers, where the air hung heavy with the scent of cedar resin and Nile silt, a perfume engineered to mimic the delta's fertile hush. Each scribe claimed a niche alcove, curtained in linen dyed the blue of lapis under moonlight, and there, by the soft glow of terracotta lamps fueled with sesame oil, its flame steady, unflickering, to mirror the heart's ideal cadence, they prepared their tools with rituals as soothing as a lover's murmur. The preparation was the first soothing fact, a ballet of deliberate slowness that Leora could almost feel in her own cramped fingers. The calamos reed, harvested from the delta's reedy fringes at the equinox when the moon waxed full, was split with a bronze blade angled just so, 30 degrees to the horizon, aligning with the pyramid's sacred slope, to ensure the nib yielded ink in a flow as even as the Nile's inundation. Callias described how the scribes would then dip the reed into a palette of 5 inks, each hue a balm, black from soot of sacred fires for the spine of letters, red ochre from Sinai's womb for headings that evoked dawn's blush, green malachite for verdant myths that grounded the soul in earth's embrace, yellow orpiment for solar tales that warmed without burning, and blue-green verdigris for celestial odes that lifted the gaze without unrest. But the true soporific was the ink's base, gum Arabic dissolved in rainwater collected under Sirius's rising, whispered over by priestesses of Isis to infuse it with the goddess's milk-sweet serenity. Leora imagined them then, these scribes, clad in linen kilts or culasarises soft as whispered confessions, dipping, pausing, exhaling over the palette to watch the ink surface still, a microcosm of the Mediterranean's glassy calm. One scribe, a woman named Theano whose verses graced the museum's walls, would hum a low threnody from Orphic hymns, her voice threading through the alcoves like smoke from a Kifi incense brazier, blending myrrh, cinnamon, and henna into a veil that draped the mind in drowsy folds. No haste marred their mornings. The library's charter under Ptolemy decreed that the first hour of work was the hour of settling, where scrolls were unrolled not to conquer text, but to court it, the papyrus faint creak a invitation to linger in the liminal space between wakefulness and wander. As Leora's lamp dimmed to a conspiratorial glow, the shard revealed deeper layers. The scribe's cultural creed, woven from Hellenistic harmony and Egyptian eternity, held that knowledge was not a blade to wield but a river to float upon, and thus their library was architected for repose. The great library sprawled across the Brucaean quarter like a living labyrinth, its porticos shaded by sycamores whose leaves rustled in programmed zephyrs, courtyards open to the sea breeze channeled through hypocaust vents to maintain a perpetual 68 degrees, the temperature of a mother's forehead against a fevered brow. Callias evoked the Mausian's heart, a colonnaded peripatos where 99 dining couches encircled a central altar to the muses, but at night it transformed into the nocturnal peristyle, where scribes reclined on wool-stuffed bolsters, scrolls propped on cedar lecterns carved with acanthus leaves that curled like inviting fingers. Here, facts soothed like salves. The library housed 700,000 scrolls, yet no chain bound them. Instead, cedar cabinets with perforated lids allowed air to circulate, carrying the faint must of aged vellum as a natural sedative, proven by the scribe's own trials to lower the pulse by 8 beats per minute. Leora pictured the night shift, the hypnopompoi, dream guides, who patrolled with oil lamps dimmed to amber, their sandals soled with felt to muffle steps, pausing at each alcove to anoint the thresholds with attar of roses from the royal gardens, a scent that, per Callias, unfurled the petals of the third eye, bidding wakefulness to wilt. One vignette, etched in the shard's curling margin, captured the essence. A scribe named Aristian, tormented by visions of the Persian sack of Athens, a shadow from his grandfather's tales, found solace in the library's echo vault, a subterranean rotunda ringed with parabolic niches that amplified not shouts, but sighs. The gentle builders, architects like Cleomenes of Naucratis, who consulted Euclid's geometries not for grandeur but for grace, had tuned the vault's dome to resonate at 432 Hz, the frequency of the universe's hum, where whispers of poetry bounced softly from wall to wall, layering into a polyphonic hush that drowned personal tempests. Aristian would enter at the witching hour, recline on a marble bench warmed by subterranean hearths, and murmur verses from Sappho's fragments. The stars about the lovely moon hide their fair faces. The echoes would return transformed, softer, overlapping like waves on Rakota's shore, until his eyelids drooped, the vault becoming a cradle where even the library's 7 million papyrus rolls seemed to breathe in unison, their collective rustle a global exhalation. Leora felt it then, reading by her own faltering light, a phantom echo in her ears, the Thames outside her window lapping in mimicry, and for the first time in moons, her chest rose and fell without the weight of rehearsal. The scribes, Callias insisted, viewed insomnia as the soul's unfinished scroll, and their cure was continuation, not force, but flow, inking the blank hours with facts that soothed like bombs. Did you know the library's catalogs, the Pinocs, numbered over 120 volumes? Each a map to mental harbors, cross-referenced by theme to lead the restless from storms of the heart to calms of the cosmos. As the city's nocturnal hum faded to a conspiratorial purr, Leora delved into the shard's core, the scribe's midnight rituals, cultural threads spun from Orphic mysteries and Stoic serenity, where work blurred into worship. Under the zodiac dome of the Soma, the scribes gathered for the Vespertine Symposium, not a feast of wine but of quiet colloquy, reclining on ivory-inlaid Klein as a lector, voice trained in the modulation of Aeschylus, recited from the Homeric hymns, pausing at cadences that aligned with the breath's natural pause, the air perfumed by Libanoto's censers swinging from bronze chains, releasing frankincense in measured puffs synced to lunar phases. Callias recounted how one scribe, a Syrian émigré named Zenobia, plagued by the desert winds of her youth howling in her dreams, would trace the library's mosaic floors, labyrinths of pebbles depicting Theseus's repose in Ariadne's arms, her fingertip following the path until the design's spirals induced a hypnotic gyre, the body's alpha waves entrained to the pebble's unyielding calm. These facts were no dry annals but living elixirs. The scribes copied texts by moonlight filtered through selenite slabs in the lunar scriptorium, where the stone's translucence softened shadows to velvet, reducing eye strain and inviting the pineal gland to secrete its somnolent dew. They bound scrolls with linen cords dyed in murex purple, the dye's extraction a rite invoking Aphrodite's gentle sway, ensuring the rolls weighed in hand felt like a lover's palm. Leora's own hands, calloused from facsimile folios, grew heavy as she read, the shard's ink seeming to warm beneath her touch, and she wondered if Callias had foreseen this, a bridge from Alexandria's lost luminaries to her lamplit loneliness. The night's deepest trough arrived with a revelation, the library's silent wing, an annex hewn into the Lochias promontory's cliff, accessible only by a spiral stair of Numidian marble that descended in a helix mimicking the cochlea's curve, amplifying inner quiet over outer noise. Here, the scribes retreated for the ora incognita, the unnamed hour when even Ptolemy's edicts yielded to repose. Vaulted in roseate granite veined with quartz that caught lantern light in prismatic hush, the wing housed the dream tomes, scrolls of Oneirocritica, interpretations of dreams transcribed from Egyptian priests and Chaldean seers, bound in goatskin soft as a ewe's underbelly. A fact to cradle close, the scribes would select a tome at random, its cedar case unlocking with a key shaped like Anubis's crook, and read aloud in whispers that echoed only to the reader, the granite-absorbing sound like a confessor's cloak. Zenobia, in her desert-haunted nights, found in one such tome that the papyrus of the 7 veils, where veils represented wakefulness as layers, Peel the first, daily dreads, with a verse from Pindar, the second, griefs unburied, with a hymn to Selene, and by the 7th, the soul slipped free into the library's collective dream sea, where Aristotle's lost dialogues on sleep washed ashore like benevolent tides. Leora paused, her breath shallow, and whispered a line from the shard, the scribe who inks the night inks his own dawn. The words hung, then dissolved, and for the first time since the cottage's collapse, her lamp's glow blurred not from fatigue's faint, but from tears that tasted of salt and serenity. The ancient scribes, with their quiet library as both forge and font, had built not just an edifice of erudition, but an architecture of absolution, a place where facts flowed like the canopic branch, soothing the parched insomniac until the mind's desert bloomed with nocturnal oases. As the first gray fingers of pre-dawn pried at her curtains, Leora folded the shard into a linen pouch scented with her own makeshift kiffy, cloves and cassia scavenged from a Soho apothecary, and placed it beneath her pillow, its weight a talisman against the tide's return. She had glimpsed only the threshold. The scribes' inks, rituals, and vaults were but the atrium to Alexandria's deeper dormitories, where cultural confluences, Greek geometries meeting Egyptian eternities, forged facts as potent as spells. Tomorrow, she vowed, she would chase more fragments, unearth the museum's midnight measures or the Pharos beacon lullabies, but for now, as the Thames whispered beyond her pane, Leora extinguished the lamp and lay back, the pouch's faint resinous breath lulling her toward the edge. Sleep did not crash over her like a wave, but lapped gently, a scribe's careful dip of Ritu ink, and in that liminal wash, she dreamed of porticos where scrolls unfurled themselves, their letters rearranging into a single, soothing script, rest, rest, rest. Word count for this first step, introduction and deep immersion in the scribes' rituals, inks, and the library's repose architecture approximately 1620. This establishes the ultra-hook through Leora's insomnia and the papyrus discovery, weaving soothing historical facts into a narrative cradle for sleep-troubled souls, focusing on sensory calm and cultural serenity. The linen pouch beneath Leora's pillow exhaled once, warm, resinous, alive, and the Clerkenwell ceiling dissolved into the vaulted night sky of Alexandria's museum. She was barefoot on cool Pentelic marble, the moon a polished silver coin balanced on the lip of the great oculus above the lecture theater. Around her, 99 ivory Klein reclined in perfect concentric rings, each draped in wool the color of midnight water. On every couch lay a scribe, eyes closed, chests rising and falling in the same slow tide. At the center stood Callias of Kos, no longer ink on papyrus but flesh and gentle smile, his beard trimmed with the same bronze blade that had once split Calamo's reeds. He carried no scroll, only a shallow bowl of polished obsidian filled with starlight. "Welcome to the Vespertine Symposium," he whispered, and the words did not echo, they simply settled over the sleeping scribes like a second blanket. He dipped 2 fingers into the bowl and drew a single silver line across Leora's forehead. The line cooled, then sank inward, and her heartbeat slowed to match the marble's own unhurried pulse. Callias led her between the couches, past scribes whose names she suddenly knew as if she had copied them herself, Theano of Cyrene, her hair braided with tiny papyrus curls, Aristian of Athens, one hand resting on a cedar lectern carved into the shape of a sleeping lion, Zenobia of Palmyra, her lips still stained with the purple of yesterday's Murex ink. Each sleeper held a dream tome on their lap, goatskin covers soft as inner wrists, clasps of electrum shaped like tiny anks. Callias opened Zenobia's tome with the reverence of a mother lifting a veil. Inside, the papyrus glowed faintly, and the text rearranged itself into a moving frieze, 7 translucent veils drifting across a desert sky. He touched the first veil, it dissolved into rose-colored mist that smelled of Cornish sea salt and Leora's childhood bedroom. The second veil became the sound of her. Father turning a page. By the 7th, the desert was gone, replaced by the hush of the museum's rooftop garden where lemon trees grew in terracotta tubs and the night air tasted of honey and parchment dust. Zenobia sighed in her sleep, a smile softening the corners of her mouth, and Leora felt the same smile arrive unbidden on her own lips. They climbed a spiral of alabaster steps that wound upward like the cochlea of a seashell. At the top opened the lunar scriptorium, an octagonal chamber walled entirely in selenite slabs no thicker than a fingernail. Moonlight poured through the stone and pooled on the floor in liquid silver. 8 scribes sat cross-legged around the pool, each with a calamos poised above a sheet of papyrus so thin it seemed made of frozen breath. Their task tonight was to copy the same sentence, over and over, until the sentence forgot it was a sentence and became pure sound. The moon is a bowl of milk left out for the soul. Every time a scribe finished the line, the ink evaporated, rose in a curl of pale vapor, and recondensed on the ceiling as a new star. The chamber was already half full of stars, and the air hummed with the soft percussion of Calamo's tips kissing papyrus, tap, lift, tap, lift. Callias invited Leora to sit. He placed a blank sheet before her and filled her calamos with ink the color of moonlit milk. "Write it once," he said. She wrote. The sentence shimmered, lifted, and became the brightest star yet. Her shoulders dropped 3 inches. The scribes around her exhaled in perfect unison, and the sound was the softest round of applause the world had ever known. From the selenite chamber they drifted, there was no walking now, only drifting, into the Pharos Annex, a narrow tower grafted onto the library's seaward wall. Inside, a single staircase spiraled downward, each step a slice of pink Aswan granite polished until it reflected the sky. At the bottom lay the beacon of dreams, an enormous bronze mirror tilted to catch the Pharos lighthouse beam and scatter it into 1,000 gentle shards. Tonight the mirror was covered with a veil of gossamer linen, beneath it slept a child, no older than 10, curled around a papyrus boat no longer than Leora's hand. Callias lifted the veil. The child's eyelids fluttered but did not open. On the child's chest rose and fell a tiny scroll tied with a ribbon of Nile blue silk. Callias untied it and read aloud in a voice softer than the linen itself. Every insomniac is a lighthouse keeper who has forgotten to lower the beam. Let the beam sink into the sea, and the sea will rock you. He rolled the scroll, tucked it behind Leora's ear, and the bronze mirror began to turn, slowly, slowly, until the Pharos beam slid off its surface and poured straight into the harbor like warm cream. Wherever the light touched the water, the waves flattened, the gulls folded their wings, and the entire city of Alexandria exhaled one long, luxurious sigh that traveled up the tower and wrapped around Leora's ankles like a friendly cat. Callias led her back through the selenite chamber, past the star-copying scribes, down the alabaster cochlea, and out onto the rooftop garden where the lemon trees now dripped moonlight instead of fruit. He knelt, pressed his palms to the warm terracotta tiles, and the entire garden lifted an inch, then settled again, rocking gently as if the library itself had become a boat. From every direction came the soft rustle of 1,000,000 scrolls turning their own pages in their sleep. The sound was the ocean, the mother, the first lullaby ever hummed over the first cradle. Callias opened his obsidian bowl, the starlight inside had thickened into honey. He dipped a cedar spoon and offered it to Leora. One taste, sweet, electric, endless, and her body forgot it had ever learned the shape of tension. She lay back on the warm tiles. Above her, the new stars arranged themselves into a single sentence that floated across the sky in letters of pale fire. Sleep is the library's longest book, and tonight you are its only reader. She read it once, twice, and on the third reading the letters dissolved into fireflies that drifted down and settled on her eyelids like punctuation marks at the end of a perfect paragraph. When she woke, the rooftop garden had folded itself into the linen pouch beneath her pillow. The pouch was heavier now, warm as fresh bread. Inside lay the child's papyrus boat, the cedar spoon, and a single selenite flake no larger than a fingernail. On the flake, in ink that still shimmered, were the words. Open the boat at the third sigh. She sighed once for her father's cough, once for the cottage that smelled of salt and mildew, once for every night she had believed the dark was an enemy. On the third sigh the tiny boat unfolded into the full-sized library ship, its decks of cedar and papyrus, its sails of moonlit linen. Callias stood at the helm, barefoot, smiling. He raised one hand, and the ship rocked her, once, twice, 3 times, until Clerkenwell, London, and the entire 21st century drifted away on a tide of warm resin and starlight. She slept. Not the sleep of escape, but the sleep of arrival, deep, fragrant, annotated in the margins with gentle footnotes of lemon blossom and distant Calamo's taps. The library ship is afloat, the fireflies have settled, and Leora's night now contains an entire city of sleeping scribes. Next we will descend into the submerged scriptorium beneath the Pharos, where ink is mixed with seawater and every letter is a bubble that rises to kiss the moon. One quiet nod and the tide will begin to sing her name. The library ship did not sail, it simply exhaled, and the cedar deck beneath Leora's bare feet turned cool and wet, as though the moon had spilled its own tide across the planks. She was standing ankle-deep in the submerged scriptorium, a vaulted chamber sunk 30 feet beneath the Pharos foundations, its walls lined with shelves of cedar sealed in pitch so the sea could visit without harm. Moonlight entered through a crystal oculus in the ceiling, filtered through 30 feet of harbor water, and arrived as a single silver spear that pierced the center of the room and pinned a floating papyrus boat to the floor like a gentle brooch. Around the spear, 8 scribes knelt on low marble stools, their linen kilts floating around their knees like white jellyfish. Each held a calamos dipped not in ink but in seawater drawn at slack tide, and every time they wrote, the letters rose off the page as tiny bubbles that drifted upward, kissed the crystal oculus, and became new stars in the harbor sky. Callias knelt beside her, sleeves rolled high, forearms glistening. He pressed a hollow reed into her hand. "Breathe through this," he whispered, "and the sea will teach you how to write with your own exhalations." She obeyed. The reed tasted of salt and cedar smoke. Her first breath entered the water and emerged as a perfect circle of bubbles that spelled, in cursive Greek, the single word, "Hush." The scribes did not look up, they simply shifted to make room, and Leora found herself kneeling between Theano and Aristion, their shoulders warm against hers. Before her floated a sheet of papyrus no larger than a dinner plate, anchored by 4 tiny amethyst weights. Theano dipped her kalamos, wrote a single lambda, and the letter lifted off the page, turned into a silver fish, and swam once around Leora's wrist before dissolving into moonlight. Aristion wrote an omega. It became a perfect pearl that rolled across the papyrus and dropped into Leora's waiting palm, cool and heavy as forgiven grief. Callias leaned close. "Tonight we copy the Tide Codex," he said. "It has only one sentence, and the sentence has only one word, and the word is your name spoken backward so softly that even you forget how to pronounce it." He guided her hand. She wrote. The letters rose, swirled, braided themselves into a single bubble no larger than a raindrop. The bubble drifted upward, kissed the crystal oculus, and burst into a sound so soft it had no name, only the feeling of her father's hand smoothing her hair the night the fever broke. Around the chamber, the shelves began to sing. Each cedar plank had been planed to a different thickness. When the tide pressed against the pitch, the planks vibrated and produced a chord older than language. The chord had 8 notes, 1 for each scribe, and the 8th note was missing until Leora's bubble burst. When it did, the chord completed itself, and the entire vault exhaled a sigh that traveled through the water, up the Pharos steps, across the harbor, and tucked every sailor, every cat, every sleepless child in Alexandria into the same gentle dream. The scribes laid down their kalamos. Theano untied a small linen pouch from her belt and spilled its contents into the water, 7 cowrie shells, each pierce. Her first breath entered the water and emerged as a perfect circle of bubbles that spelled, in cursive Greek, the single word, "Hush." The scribes did not look up, they simply shifted to make room, and Leora found herself kneeling between Theano and Aristion, their shoulders warm against hers. Before her floated a sheet of papyrus no larger than a dinner plate, anchored by 4 tiny amethyst weights. Theano dipped her kalamos, wrote a single lambda, and the letter lifted off the page, turned into a silver fish, and swam once around Leora's wrist before dissolving into moonlight. Aristion wrote an omega. It became a perfect pearl that rolled across the papyrus and dropped into Leora's waiting palm, cool and heavy as forgiven grief. Callias leaned close. "Tonight we copy the Tide Codex," he said. "It has only one sentence, and the sentence has only one word, and the word is your name spoken backward so softly that even you forget how to pronounce it." He guided her hand. She wrote. The letters rose, swirled, braided themselves into a single bubble no larger than a raindrop. The bubble drifted upward, kissed the crystal oculus, and burst into a sound so soft it had no name, only the feeling of her father's hand smoothing her hair the night the fever broke. Around the chamber, the shelves began to sing. Each cedar plank had been planed to a different thickness. When the tide pressed against the pitch, the planks vibrated and produced a chord older than language. The chord had 8 notes, 1 for each scribe, and the 8th note was missing until Leora's bubble burst. When it did, the chord completed itself, and the entire vault exhaled a sigh that traveled through the water, up the Pharos steps, across the harbor, and tucked every sailor, every cat, every sleepless child in Alexandria into the same gentle dream. The scribes laid down their kalamos. Theano untied a small linen pouch from her belt and spilled its contents into the water, 7 cowrie shells, each pierce. And strung on a thread of moonlight. She slipped the thread over Leora's head. The shells settled against her collarbone and began to click softly, click, click, in perfect rhythm with the missing eighth note. Every click erased 1 minute of borrowed wakefulness. By the time the seventh shell clicked, Leora's eyelids were translucent, and she could see the harbor floor through them, coral the color of papyrus, fish wearing tiny papyrus hats, a sunken statue of Ptolemy smiling as though he had just remembered the punchline to a 2,000-year-old joke. Callias stood. The water around his knees parted, revealing a spiral of mother-of-pearl steps that led downward into darkness lit only by the glow of the cowrie shells. He took her hand, warm, calloused, steady, and together they descended. At the bottom lay a single room no larger than a confessional, its walls lined with niches that held not scrolls but bottles of seawater collected on every new moon for the past 300 years. Each bottle was stoppered with a tiny papyrus boat. Callias selected one bottle, uncorked it, and poured a single drop onto Leora's tongue. The drop tasted of every bedtime story her father had ever read aloud, every salt tear she had ever cried into her pillow, every wave that had ever rocked the Cornish cottage to sleep. The room began to rock, gently, gently, and the bottles answered with a chorus of liquid lullabies. Callias opened a cedar chest and lifted out a blanket woven from moonlight and seaweed silk. He draped it over Leora's shoulders. The blanket was weightless yet warm, and wherever it touched her skin, a tiny star appeared and sank inward, lighting the corridors of her veins. She lay down on the mother-of-pearl floor. The tide entered the room, not as water but as music, soft, slow, inevitable. It lifted her an inch, then two, until she floated in the exact center of the chamber, cradled by nothing but the memory of water. Above her, the 8 scribes formed a circle. They joined hands and began to hum the missing 8th note. The hum traveled through the water, through the crystal oculus, through the pharos beam, and scattered across the city like warm ash. Wherever it landed, a window opened, a candle was snuffed, a cat curled tighter, a child turned over and smiled in sleep. Callias knelt beside her floating body and placed the hollow reed against her lips. "Breathe out," he said. She breathed. Her exhalation became a bubble the size of the moon. The bubble rose, carrying every sleepless night she had ever owned, and burst against the oculus with a sound like a kiss. The fragments rained down as tiny papyrus boats, each carrying a single letter of her name spelled backward. The boats drifted to the 8 scribes, who caught them gently and tucked them into their hearts. The chamber exhaled. The tide receded. The bottles settled. The missing 8th note was no longer missing, it lived inside Leora's chest, clicking softly with every heartbeat of the cowrie shells. When she woke, the submerged scriptorium had folded itself into the hollow reed now tucked behind her ear. The reed was warm, salty, humming. On her collarbone, the 7 cowrie shells had become 8. The 8th shell was smooth and new, carved with a single word in Demotic, home. She smiled, rolled onto her side, and slept again, deeper this time, because the sea had learned her name and the library had taught it how to pronounce the hush between syllables. Outside, London's first bus rumbled past, but inside her chest the submerged scriptorium rocked on a tide of warm ink and moonlight, and every bubble that rose carried another minute of borrowed tomorrow back to the sea. The tide has sung, the 8th note is found, and Leora's night now contains an entire ocean of sleeping letters. Next we will ascend to the rooftop aviary where the scribes release messenger doves carrying dreams written on papyrus feathers, and every feather that lands becomes a new constellation. One quiet nod and the doves will begin to coo her name. The hollow reed behind Leora's ear gave one soft pop, like a cork slipping from a bottle of warm moonlight, and the submerged scriptorium folded upward into a spiral of silver bubbles that carried her straight through the crystal oculus and out onto the library's highest roof. She arrived barefoot on warm terracotta tiles still holding the day's sun, the city below her a scatter of sleeping lamps cupped in the palm of the harbor. Above, the sky was a vast, open scroll, and every star was a fresh ink drop waiting to be read. A low cedar fence ringed the roof, and inside the fence stood a dovecot no larger than a child's playhouse, its walls latticed with papyrus slats so thin the moon shone through them like parchment. Inside the cote, 100 snow-white doves slept with their heads beneath their wings, each wing feather a tiny scroll of papyrus no longer than an eyelash. Callias waited beside the cote, barefoot, wearing a simple linen tunic the color of dawn fog. He carried a shallow bowl of warm milk mixed with crushed rose petals and a single drop of Nile water. "Tonight," he whispered, "we release the dream post." He lifted a dove from its perch. The bird woke without alarm, eyes soft as fresh ink, and settled into Leora's cupped hands like a letter that had always known her address. Callias dipped a goose feather into the bowl and painted a single word across the dove's breast in milk rose ink, "Hush." The word glowed faintly, then sank inward until the dove's heart shone through its feathers like a tiny lantern. He opened a cedar box and spilled a handful of papyrus feathers onto the tiles. Each feather was blank on one side and inscribed on the other with a single line of a dream. Theano, Aristion, Zenobia, and the other scribes appeared along the fence, silent, smiling, their linen robes fluttering though there was no wind. One by one they chose a feather, rolled it into a tight scroll, and tucked it beneath the dove's wing. When the last feather was placed, the dove gave a soft coo, a sound like warm bread breaking open, and lifted from Leora's palms. It circled the dovecot once, twice, 3 times, each circle slower than the last, until it hovered directly above her head. Then it released the feathers. They drifted down in slow motion, turning end over end, and every time a feather brushed her cheek it left behind a word that tasted of rose milk and childhood summers: rest, drift, home. The other doves woke, one by one, and the scribes repeated the ritual until the sky was full of soft white shapes carrying tiny scrolls of light. Callias opened the cote's lattice door and the birds rose in a single breath, a living constellation that spiraled upward, outward, over the harbor, over the sleeping city, over the dark ribbon of the Mediterranean. Wherever a dove flew, a window opened, a candle dimmed, a sailor turned in his hammock and smiled at a dream he would never remember. Leora watched until the last bird became a star and the last star became a feather drifting back to earth. One feather landed on the tiles at her feet. She knelt, unrolled it, and read. "Every insomniac is a rooftop waiting for its own dove." She tucked the feather behind her ear beside the hollow reed. The dovecot sighed, folded itself into a cedar thimble, and slipped into her pocket. The scribes bowed, foreheads to the warm tiles, and dissolved into moonlight that smelled of crushed petals and warm milk. Callias remained. He took her hand and led her to the roof's eastern edge where a single lemon tree grew in a terracotta pot no larger than a teacup. From its branches hung 7 tiny lanterns made of papyrus soaked in rose oil. He lit them with a breath, the flames were blue and soundless. Beneath the tree lay a wool blanket the color of midnight water. He spread it, sat, and patted the space beside him. Leora sat. The city below had gone entirely quiet, even the harbor gulls had tucked their heads beneath their wings. Callias opened a small cedar box and lifted out a single papyrus feather no longer than a matchstick. He placed it on her tongue. It dissolved instantly, tasting of rose milk, warm bread, and the exact moment her father had closed the last page of their bedtime story. The lemon tree exhaled. The lantern swayed. The blanket lifted an inch off the tiles and began to rock, slow, slower, slowest, until Leora was floating in the exact center of the rooftop, cradled by nothing but the memory of wings. Above her, the doves returned, no longer white but translucent, each bird trailing a ribbon of moonlight. They circled once, twice, 3 times, then folded their wings and became a soft canopy that settled over her like the gentlest possible quilt. Callias lay beside her, one arm beneath her head, the other resting lightly on her heart. He began to hum the eighth note, the one the submerged scriptorium had taught her, and every dove answered until the sky was a choir of feathered hush. The lemon tree dropped a single blossom onto her cheek. It smelled of every bedtime she had ever missed and every bedtime still to come. She breathed it in. The canopy tightened, not to bind but to hold. The lanterns dimmed to embers. The city exhaled one last luxurious sigh and rolled over in its sleep. Callias whispered the final line of the Tide Codex against her ear. Sleep is the only letter that never needs an address. She smiled, turned her face into the hollow of his shoulder, and let the doves carry her across the threshold where even dreams forget to knock. When she woke, the rooftop had folded itself into the cedar thimble in her pocket. The thimble was warm, fragrant, humming. On her tongue lay a single papyrus feather that tasted of rose milk and warm bread. Outside, London's first blackbird sang a three-note question. She answered with a sigh so soft it folded the entire night into a letter addressed to tomorrow. Then she slept again, deeper this time, because the doves had learned her name and the library had taught them how to pronounce the hush between wing beats. The doves have settled, the lemon tree is asleep, and Leora's night now contains an entire sky of messenger dreams. Next we will follow the final feather to the royal bedchamber of Cleopatra, where the last scribe queen keeps a pillow stuffed with papyrus shavings that remember every dream Egypt ever dreamed. One quiet nod and the Nile will begin to rock the royal barge. 3.8's fast part in paragraph. The final feather drifted downward, no longer white but the exact gold of Cleopatra's palace lamplight, and when it brushed Leora's lips it tasted of lotus honey and the hush that falls over a river just before the moon kisses its own reflection. She was no longer on the rooftop. She was reclining on a cedar barge moored beneath the palace's eastern balcony, the Nile rocking her with the same slow heartbeat that had once lulled the last Ptolemaic queen to sleep. The barge was draped in linen so fine it floated an inch above the deck, and every fold caught the glow of 100 alabaster lamps filled with sesame oil scented with kiffy. Cleopatra herself stood at the prow, barefoot, wearing a simple cuirass of moonlight-colored linen, her hair unbound and spilling over one shoulder like a second river. In her arms she cradled a pillow no larger than a dinner plate, stuffed with papyrus shavings that rustled softly. Whenever a dream passed overhead, she smiled, the famous smile, but softer, as though the ASP had never happened and the world had simply agreed to let her rest. She knelt, pressed the pillow into Leora's hands, and whispered, "Tonight every dream Egypt ever dreamed is yours to borrow." The pillow was warm, fragrant, alive. When Leora laid her cheek against it, the shavings rearranged themselves into the exact shape of her childhood bed in the Cornish cottage, complete with the faded patchwork quilt her grandmother had sewn from theatre curtains. Cleopatra lifted a tiny bronze spoon and stirred the air above the pillow. The kiffy smoke coiled into 7 perfect rings that drifted upward and became 7 tiny papyrus boats, each carrying a single letter of Leora's name spelled in hieroglyphs of starlight. The boats sailed across the ceiling of the barge, which had become the night sky over Memphis, and wherever they passed, a constellation brightened inside. The queen opened a cedar casket and spilled a handful of lotus seeds onto the deck. Each seed sprouted instantly into a miniature blue lotus that opened with a sound like a kiss. She gathered the blossoms, wove them into a crown, and set it gently on Leora's brow. The petals were cool, pulsing faintly, and every pulse released a memory of water, the Nile at dawn, the Thames at dusk, the rain on the cottage roof the night her father read aloud until the storm forgot to be angry. Cleopatra lay beside her, one arm beneath Leora's head, the other resting lightly on the papyrus pillow. She began to hum, low, liquid, endless, and the Nile answered by rocking the barge in perfect 4/4 time. The alabaster lamps dimmed to embers. The lotus crown tightened, not to bind but to hold. The papyrus shavings rustled once, twice, 3 times, and rearranged themselves into a single sentence that floated above the pillow in letters of warm gold. Sleep is the only crown that never weighs heavy. Around them, the palace dissolved into fragrance and memory. The cedar barge became the royal bedchamber, its walls painted with scenes of Nut arching over Geb, her star-spangled body the exact curve of a protective embrace. The bed itself was a low ebony frame inlaid with electrum lotuses, its mattress stuffed with down from sacred ibis and layers of papyrus so soft they sighed when breathed upon. Cleopatra drew a linen sheet over them both, the famous royal purple, but faded to the color of twilight seen through closed eyelids. She tucked the papyrus pillow beneath Leora's cheek and whispered the final secret of the scribe queens. Every night I stuff this pillow with the day's unfinished dreams. Tonight I leave the drawer open so your dreams may finish themselves. She slid open a tiny cedar drawer in the pillow's side. Inside lay a single blank papyrus feather and a drop of Nile water suspended in midair. Leora dipped the feather, the drop became ink, she wrote one word, home, and the feather dissolved into 1,000 fireflies that swarmed upward and became the ceiling fresco of Nut, now smiling down with Leora's own mother's eyes. The Nile rocked. The lotus crown pulsed. The papyrus shavings rustled a lullaby in Demotic, Greek, and the lost language of childhood summers. Cleopatra's heartbeat slowed until it matched the rivers, and Leora's heartbeat followed, until there were only 2 hearts in all of Egypt and both were asleep. Outside, the palace lamps dimmed to embers. Inside, the drawer stayed open, and every unfinished dream, hers, her father's, Cleopatra's, the library's, drifted in on currents of warm kiffy and curled up between them like friendly cats. The barge rocked once, twice, 3 times, and lifted an inch off the water, floating on nothing but the combined breath of every gentle scribe who had ever lived. Leora slept. Not the sleep of queens, nor of scholars, nor of daughters grieving beside the sea, but the sleep of a woman who had finally been read aloud to by the entire ancient world and found the story was simply, "You are safe, you are home, you are the last page and the first dream." When she woke, the royal barge had folded itself into the papyrus pillow beneath her cheek. The pillow was warm, fragrant, humming. On her brow the lotus crown had become a single blue petal that smelled of Nile water and warm bread. In the drawer lay a new feather, inscribed in Cleopatra's own hand. "Wear me when the city forgets how to dream." She slipped the petal behind her ear, the feather beneath her tongue, and slept again, deeper this time, because the queen had taught the river her name and the library had taught the river how to pronounce the hush between heartbeats. The Nile has rocked, the lotus crown has closed, and Leora's night now contains every dream Egypt ever loaned the world. This is the final fold. Tomorrow we will wake inside the linen pouch and discover that the library was never lost, only sleeping inside every insomniac who ever dared to open a book after midnight. One quiet nod and the dawn will begin to write its own gentle postscript. Or stay here on the royal barge, the kiffy is still warm. The lotus petal behind Leora's ear unfurled once more, not into barge or palace, but into the exact hush that lives between the last page of a bedtime story and the first breath of morning. She opened her eyes to the familiar slant of Clerkenwell's sunlight across her bedroom wall, yet the wall was now a sheet of finest papyrus, its fibers glowing faintly with the memory of Nile's silt and starlight. The linen pouch beneath her pillow had become a small cedar box no larger than a matchbook, its lid carved with a single hieroglyph, the open eye of Horus, but the eye was closed in perfect sleep. She lifted the lid. Inside lay every gift the library had ever given her. The hollow reed filled with warm tide. The 8th cowrie shell that clicked only when she forgot to count. The papyrus feather that tasted of rose milk. The blue lotus petal that smelled of Cleopatra's smile. And, curled in the center like a sleeping cat, a single blank scroll no longer than her little finger. She unrolled the scroll. It was blank on both sides, yet warm, as though it had spent the night pressed against a living heart. A breath of kiffy drifted from its fibers, myrrh, cinnamon, and the faintest trace of Cornish sea salt. She understood, this was the postscript, the page the library had saved for her alone. She reached for the reed pen that had appeared on her bedside table, calamos, bronze nib, ink of moonlit milk, and wrote one line in the center of the blank scroll. "Tonight I will sleep, and tomorrow the world will wake softer." The ink sank inward, glowed once, and the scroll folded itself into a tiny papyrus boat. The boat lifted off the page, sailed across the sunbeam, and slipped through the open window like a dove returning home. One quiet nod and the dawn will begin to write its own gentle postscript. Or stay here on the royal barge, the kiffy is still warm. Outside, London stirred, buses coughed, pigeons cooed, a kettle somewhere began its morning song, but every sound arrived muffled, as though the city had pulled a quilt of Alexandrian linen over its head. Leora sat up. The cedar box dissolved into warm sand that trickled between her fingers and vanished. The gifts remained, not as objects but as gentle habits. The hollow reed became the way she now breathed, slow, tidal, deliberate. The eighth shell became the soft click her heart made when it decided to trust the dark. The feather became the taste of her own name spoken backward in dreams. The lotus petal became the cool spot on the pillow where worry used to lie. She rose, padded to the kitchen, and filled the kettle. While it heated, she opened her notebook, the one that had once been filled with frantic 3 a.m. scribbles, and found every page blank except the last. On it, in ink that still smelled of kiffy, someone, perhaps Callias, perhaps Cleopatra, perhaps the library itself, had written a short recipe in 3 lines. Unroll 1 memory of water. Add starlight to taste. Stir with the 8th breath. Serve warm, in bed, with the window open to whatever night arrives. She smiled, closed the notebook, and carried her tea back to bed. The sunbeam had moved, the papyrus boat was gone, but in its place a single white dove perched on the sill, breast glowing faintly with the word hush. It cooed once, a sound like warm bread breaking open, then lifted into the London morning and became part of the ordinary sky. Leora slipped between cool sheets that now smelled faintly of lotus and cedar, laid her cheek on the exact spot the papyrus pillow had taught her, and closed her eyes. Sleep arrived not as a visitor but as a resident, quiet, familiar, already unpacking its bags. Somewhere across the city, a night shift nurse sighed and slept, a student closed her laptop and dreamed of blue lotuses, a taxi driver parked beneath a street lamp and forgot to turn the engine off. Because the hush was enough. The library had never burned, it had simply learned to fold itself into every bedside table, every closed eyelid, every 8th breath of every insomniac who dared to believe that knowledge could be gentle. Leora slept until noon, until 3, until the following dawn, until time itself grew embarrassed and stopped counting. When she finally woke, the bedroom wall was ordinary plaster again, but the sunbeam carried a faint scent of Nile silt, and on her windowsill lay a single papyrus feather. She tucked it behind her ear, opened her notebook, and began to write, not a cure, not a treatise, but a simple letter addressed to every sleepless soul still waiting for their dove. Dear friend. The library is open. Bring nothing but your tired eyes. The scribes have saved you a pillow stuffed with every dream the world has ever finished for you. Sign your name with the 8th breath, and the hush will do the rest. She sealed the letter with a drop of tap water that tasted, impossibly, of starlight, and left it on the sill. By nightfall the letter was gone, carried away by a white dove whose wings left no shadow. Leora smiled, turned off the lamp, and slept again, this time without the need of barge or palace, because the library now lived inside the soft click of her 8th cowrie heart. And somewhere, in a city that had forgotten how to dream, a window opened, a candle dimmed, and a brand new insomniac sighed the first of 8 breaths that would rock the world softer than it had ever been. The library is closed for the night, the doves are home, and Leora's sleep is now the quietest wing in the quietest library the world never lost. Whenever another sleepless hour knocks, open the cedar box beneath your own pillow. The 8th breath is already waiting, warm and rose-scented, ready to carry you back across the hush. Good night. The scribes are turning the page for you. It is the soft click of the eighth cowrie shell inside your own chest, the moment the kettle forgets to boil because the water has already become moonlight. It is the dove that lands on your windowsill at 3:17 a.m., drops a single papyrus feather, and refuses to leave until you close the book you were never meant to finish tonight. It is Cleopatra's smile tucked inside your grandmother's quilt, the Nile rocking your childhood bed although you now live 3,000 miles from any river. It is the blank scroll unrolling across tomorrow's ceiling, waiting for you to write only one word, sleep, and then letting the ink evaporate into 1,000 new stars that spell your name backwards so gently you forget how to pronounce worry. It is the library folding itself smaller than a heartbeat, slipping into the space between your pillow and your cheek, and staying there forever, open 24 hours, admission free, all questions answered with the same soft sentence. Hush, dear friend, the story is already dreaming you. Close the book now. The scribes have turned off every lamp except the one inside your breath. Good night.